Okay, thank you and welcome everyone. It's a joy to be together. And we are Compass Europe. We disciple people to be stewards of what God has entrusted them so that they have more time to serve the Lord and they serve with their time, talent, and treasure. And we believe that once we are saved, we need to grow in knowing Jesus and to follow him in all areas of our lives, which includes finances. And the Bible has a lot to say about finances. The Bible has more than 2,000 verses who directly or indirectly address this topic. And we gather in small groups or one-on-one and wrestle with these issues and try to be better stewards of our finances. And we meet regularly for online meetings to encourage one another and to challenge on important issues. And because we know that we can't reach everyone everywhere on our own, we need to do it in partnership with other ministry leaders. This is why we want to serve ministry leaders. And this evening, we will address a topic that is important for us as leaders. And we have a very dear brother from the States who is one of the top experts on AI in the world. And he's been involved with artificial intelligence before we've even heard this term. So he has many awards and degrees, and he may share more about himself. But with this, I want to introduce Charlie and welcome him and ask him to share more about your background and what God has put on your heart. He will share with us first for about 20 minutes more of what is AI, what is behind it. And then we'll have time for Q&A. You can use the chat to put your questions, or if we remain that small group, we can also unmute ourselves and ask the questions. Then we will have another 20 minutes where Charlie will speak more of the practical things, what to do and what not to do regarding to AI in ministry. And then we will have some discussion time. With this, Charlie, you have the floor.
Thank you, Pavel, and thanks everyone for joining. I'm coming to you from just outside of Chicago. I'm actually at my office at it's a Department of Energy Research Laboratory. Here I'm a computer scientist along with a position I have at the University of Chicago, which is in Chicago. I've been working with AI directly with AI probably for about 10 or 11 years. And my specialty in terms of my research since the mid 1980s has been research in internet and high performance computing or supercomputers. So AI has really come to the fore in the last 6 or so years, largely because we finally got computers that are big enough and powerful enough to train these what are called neural networks, these models, to do the amazing things that they're able to do. So let me share my slides here. And as Pavel said, I want to take some time to just provide some background on AI and what's happening. Just as we were getting ready, I realized that my title slide didn't have any graphics. And so I just asked one of my chat models that I use to give me a graphic, an example of coming up with a graphic for a presentation if you only have 2 minutes to do it. I'll talk about more examples like this of using AI. Before doing this seminar, and I've done 3 of these more detailed seminars on AI for the European Leadership Forum since 2023, I wanted to sort of get a gauge for how the public is thinking about AI and how that differs from the way insider experts like myself do. And by the way, we'll provide these slides to you, so I'm going to go through them fairly quickly. But I would note that while people like me are excited about AI, more excited than concerned, the general public is more concerned than excited. There's more concern in the general public than there is among AI people about the elimination of jobs, and whether we should be concerned about that and when that's likely to happen or start happening. And then there's some general public concern about AI leading to less connection between people. And in each of these areas, I would say, I think I'm probably equally excited and concerned about AI, but I'm with the general public in terms of concern about the impact that AI will have on the labor market, and our jobs and the jobs of the people that work for us. And also, I'm probably more concerned than the general public is even about the impact that AI is already having on relationships. And I'll talk about all of those things. One thing that is new about AI is that we're all accustomed to technology changing very rapidly. This smartphones that we carry around with us, every 2 years they get twice as powerful, for the same price. And over a long period of time, that doubling in capability every 18 to 30 months gets us amazing progress. This device right here, let me forget that. This device right here has a computer in it that's more powerful than the computers that the Apollo project used for the NASA program, for the Apollo program. This smartphone is, for less than one thousandth of the cost, of a supercomputer 40 years ago. This is a more powerful device. So if I could transport myself back to the beginning of my career in supercomputing, if I had one of these, I would have the most powerful computer in the world. It'd be like magic. So we're used to that. What we're not used to is the speed of AI, which leaves that kind of acceleration in the dust, in that we're seeing improvements in capabilities that, depending on your metrics for measurement, are giving us 10 to 100 times more powerful capabilities, on a year by year basis for the last 5 years. And that's why, even though some of us have been watching generative AI, these chat type models, for 5 years now, nobody kind of noticed them until the fall of or winter of 2022, when ChatGPT came out, because it was moving so quickly and continues to move so quickly. One of the concerns that is on the horizon now, and you'll hear more about it in the news, is, I assume you can see my cursor here, is in the next 2 years or so, and some have said we are already there, some say it's 3 years away, but within the next several years, AI will get to the point where the model can judge its performance and change its design to self-improve. And at that point, we have this chain reaction that can happen where AI becomes what we call super intelligent. And so that will make a large difference in many areas. So it's moving quickly. I think that we're right to be concerned. We're also right to be excited about AI. And I hope to give you examples in both of those areas. The term artificial intelligence kind of stems back to a 1950 paper that Alan Turing wrote, called Computing Machinery and Intelligence. And he posed the question, can machines think? It's an interesting paper. It's as you can imagine, it's from the Quarterly Review of Psychology and Philosophy. Turing was a mathematician, and if we had had the title computer scientist at the time, we didn't, but he would have been titled that. But he's not a philosopher. And so this paper is an interesting kind of walk through the various objections that people might have to whether machines can think. And I'll come back to some of his discussion later. People often say, well, what do you mean by artificial, or what do you mean by intelligence? There are two definitions of artificial. One is it's has the same properties as something that's real, but it's created in an artificial way, and is not really that thing. Fake fur coat is not really fur from an animal. It's fur from a manufacturing process. A plastic plant looks like a plant, but it's not really a plant. On the other hand, if we mean artificial in terms of artificially created, like we're able to grow from muscle cells. We can grow meat in the laboratory. It's real meat. It's just not grown on a farm. We can create synthetic oil. That's real oil. It has the properties of natural oil, but it's not made naturally. We have created artificial insulin. It is insulin. It's real insulin. It works like insulin, just wasn't created in a pancreas. And so that definition of artificial is very much a debate today, is whether we've just got a powerful tool here or an entirely new species. And we'll come to back to that as we talk more. There was a recent article last couple of years looking at sentience and soul, and I was surprised at some of the proponents that come from the church body at large that seem to think that when artificial intelligence gets to a certain point of sophistication, that maybe it actually would have a soul. I come down on the other side of here in that I agree with the author here that consciousness is this gift from God. And I believe that when God breathed life into Adam and Eve, a big part of that life was a soul and the image of God that God breathed in. I don't see any evidence that God is breathing his image into any of the computers I've worked with, or certainly any of the software that I worked with. And again, we'll come back to that. And I want you to be sort of thinking about that because it's at this point and maybe in the past an interesting academic philosophical question, but it will become a very practical public discussion as AI gets more powerful and more convincing in its interactions. John Searle is a philosopher. He's now retired at the University of California, Berkeley. And back in about 1980, he started thinking about this well before we had AI like we do today. But he envisioned what we would now say is an AI system like ChatGPT in terms of what he called the Chinese room experiment. And he says, imagine there's a man in this room who doesn't speak Chinese, but he follows a rule book that says when you see these Chinese characters, the proper response is these Chinese characters. Very sophisticated rule book, but a rule book nonetheless. And a person on the outside of that room would say, well, whoever's in that room is fluent in Chinese, even though what's happening in that room is a person is following a formal program and not understanding what's happening. And many of us think that this is essentially what's happening inside these AI models, is that they appear to be conversing with us and interacting as if they understand and have some awareness. But in fact, it is a formal program that is being executed. And at the end of the day, it is zeros and ones, just like Microsoft Word or your web browser or any other application, just much more powerful. We're used to AI models being all around us in our social media feeds and recommendations for websites, even in navigating or even on our mobile devices. There's an AI model that draws boxes around faces, and it's running right on your mobile device. We're seeing AI now being injected into many other tools that we're used to using, such as Apple Intelligence or Microsoft's Copilot that allows you to interact with an AI model within a Office application like Excel. I use ChatGPT on my phone for everything, including fashion advice. I have kids that are often critiquing my fashion style, and so in this case, I was able to get some defense from ChatGPT. I mentioned before, all of these capabilities really are built out of what we call artificial neural networks. And these are programs that emulate the behavior of cells and the interaction of neurons and the interaction of neurons, such as in a brain. We don't know how the human brain is wired, much more complex than any of the neural networks we have, but we have gotten to the point where these neural networks, like you see on the right-hand side, have billions of neurons. And so they are approaching the scale of a human brain, which has about 90 billion neurons. So while we don't have the brain architecture, we do have now artificial neural networks that are of the same scale in terms of neurons and connections. But at the core, these models are designed to gather statistical information from all of the data that's used to train them, and then guess at the next word or the next sentence or the next paragraph to complete a question and answer or a dialogue. And so they will take our what we call a prompt. I might write a prompt like, please write me a limerick about Christian professors gathering in Poland, use references and speaker names from the 2024 European Leadership Forum. And it will take that prompt and it will say, what's the most likely next word on that after that prompt? And then it will continue that cycle. It will go out and use a tool to get onto the web to get more information, and then it will complete the limerick for me. And so these are what we call token predictors. And that's what I mean by the formal program. Now, of course, now that we have what are called reasoning models, there's a much more intricate interplay between the prompt and the model as it's self-evaluating and multiple models talking to one another. But at the end of the day, it's a formal program that's being executed. How do I use generative AI? I use AI every day as a sort of a tool that's always open on my desktop, whether I'm working on a report or writing a paper, or even cooking at home, or as you noticed, deciding whether to wear socks with my
Welcome
sandals.
to the European Leadership
Can you
Forum.
hear that?
This seminar is engaging AI and considering its impact on our lives and the culture around us.
So I took that video and gave it to a tool that's a year
Willkommen beim
ago.
Europäischen Leitungsgespräch. Dieses Seminar beschäftigt sich mit künstlicher Intelligenz und betrachtet ihre Auswirkungen auf unser Leben und die Kultur um uns herum.
So that's a year ago, and today the capability that we have, you could sort of tell that lip sync wasn't quite right, but the language was good. But today the tools are good enough that you would have very difficult time telling the difference between an AI enhanced or changed video and the original. So I want to say one or two more things, and then we'll stop for some Q&A. One way to think about these models is that when I was in university, we were learning to program computers with formal programming languages like Fortran, or these days programming languages like Python. And we still do that, but now you could sort of think of these models as a new computer, a new type of computer that is programmed with language. And so when you are asking a chat model, when you are interacting with it, your prompt is really programming the model. And so you can get a very wide difference in quality of output depending on how much thought and care you put into the program that you are asking that model to execute, which is your prompt. And so there are examples on here on ways to prompt these models better. One you see on the right-hand side is it's very helpful for these models because of the way that they work to think out loud, if you will. And so when I give it a prompt and then I say, here's the answer, but I don't say how I got to that answer, then the model has a more difficult time constructing an appropriate response. So we, in the limited time we have today, of course, we can't go into lots of detail here, but I give this to you as when you look at these slides later as maybe some advice on prompting. So let's maybe stop and it's 12:50 or 55 past the hour, or 4 minutes until the hour. And Pavel, I'll let you moderate any sort of Q&A and let me know when you want me to move on to part two.
Yep. Thank you, Charlie. And I would like to welcome Patricia, who is our office manager at Compass Europe. And she will tell us if we have any questions in the chat, and she'll read them.
Yeah, thank you. We have two questions. The first one is like that. Some people claim there is a demon behind AI. What do you say about this?
Well, AI is a computer program. It's a tool. It's a set of technologies, not unlike a nuclear weapon, a blender, or an airplane. And so I believe that certainly demonic forces can motivate the inappropriate or damaging use of any technology. I don't believe that it's appropriate to say that the entire technology is you know that there's demonic forces behind an entire technology. It's so I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, that's a very good topic. So it's how you use it. Yeah.
Yeah, the second question. Can a creature like us, human beings, create something more intelligent than himself?
Another good question. One question that we still are grappling with is how do we gauge what we mean by and therefore how we measure intelligence? We have IQ tests and we have other ways to measure intelligence. And in terms of certain skills, we're already at a point where these models are able to outperform human beings in pretty dramatic ways when it relates to knowledge and application of knowledge. I don't have a philosophical problem with that any more than I have a problem with a human being able to make a machine that is stronger than ourselves. So as we make bulldozers that are able to move dirt much more strongly than I could. And so I see these tools as being able to do certain knowledge-based tasks better than we can in a sort of the same way. Let me, if there's other questions, I can take them too, but let me go back to the first question and kind of unpack a little bit more why somebody might make that claim, and it's not an irrational claim. When we create a chatbot, a model, the first thing that happens is we have billions of pages of text. Okay, we take the whole internet, we take dictionaries, encyclopedias, papers, we take transcripts from television shows, and we push these through and train the model so that the model understands all of the patterns that it sees in that data. And that data will produce in the model an inherent, I'll call it worldview or bias, if you will, that is completely derived from the input data. And so you will see bias as an example. If you take the history of writing text in plays and movies and all that, the vast majority of doctors over time have been men, male. And so the models will pick up that most doctors are male from that historical information. And so we would say there's a gender bias there. And that would play out in languages that have masculine and feminine forms of nouns, such as Italian or Spanish, in a gender bias. So that's going to be in there, and we can work to counter any of those kind of biases. There's a second thing that can be done, which is after you get that pre-trained model, to turn it into a chatbot, you do what's called fine tuning. And there you have both you're adding information and you're trying to influence the way the model behaves by giving it positive or negative rewards on question and answer so that it can improve. So you might say, and this humans generally do this, and nowadays more, they're having one model test and evaluate another. So you might say, well, that answer was too harsh, or that answer was too friendly. And so there's a constant attempt to make these models perform and behave in certain ways. And what that means is that there's ample opportunity to inappropriately use AI to create models that would be very damaging and that one could say would definitely have demonic forces behind them. If we build a model that is designed to, for example, convince people to take on an atheistic and materialistic worldview, I would say that's a model that's got some demonic power behind it. But it's not the AI itself, it's the way it's being used. So now I want to, again, move fairly quickly just to make the most advantage of our time and go through some uses of AI in ministry and some things that I think it's important for ministry leaders to be thinking about. So let me give you an example of how I use AI in terms of one particular project. I was talking with a Romanian pastor who asked me the question, which AI model out there, which product is best at translating? Because I have materials, gospel materials and other materials in Romanian that I want to translate into English and vice versa. And I said, well, I don't know, but my own research is in developing systems to help us to evaluate the capabilities of models. And so I applied some of my own tools to do the following. I said, okay, well, let's evaluate. I ended up evaluating 6 or 7 models. And so what I did was I said, I prompted a model. I said, you will compare translations of the original text, translate the following, and told it, I gave it a very detailed how I wanted it to do the evaluation or the translation, accurate and natural. And then having gotten, and this illustration, we'll just talk about 3 different models. So I put the original text through 3 different models, the red, yellow, and green model, and I got 3 translations. Then I took one of the models, the one that I knew was the most advanced, and I said, you will compare the translations with the originals, and I want you to give me these criteria with a score ranging from 1 to 5. So I was very specific of what I wanted. And then I wanted it to then provide the scores and rationales for each of them according to those translations. And so then I got these circles there, which are evaluations of those translations done by the green model doing the evaluation. And then I asked the green model to give me a report. But I was very specific. I want an introduction that talks about the purpose and the methods. I want descriptions of all the models, evaluation methodology. I want you to describe the scoring report because I didn't want to have to write this. I wasn't doing this for work or for, I wasn't paid to do it. So I'm okay having AI do the work for me. But even if I were doing this for work, I would take a very similar approach. And what I got from the model was this very nice paper. Now, what I did was I just skimmed the paper and sent it to my friend who had asked the question. I think that's fine, but I wouldn't have published this as a paper with my name on it unless I had done the majority of the writing. And what I would do, and I often do when I'm using AI, is I will ask for suggestions, but then I will usually rewrite using the suggestions and do very little sort of copy and paste when it's something that has my name on it. An example of using models, multiple models, to get more power than just using a single model. There was another instance where I needed to write a meeting report for a workshop that I organized with about a bunch of people. And I took all of the PowerPoint slides that were used, and I asked one AI model to give me a report with similar instructions as I give this one. And then I asked a second model, I said, here's the source material, here's the draft report, please critique the report and improve it for me. And so then between me and these 2 models, we ended up with this report. If I were writing a paper with colleagues, I would write the paper and then I would send my draft to an AI model and ask for suggestions. But I would not say, write me a paper, here's the outline. So there's a sort of a line that I've been drawing there where in some cases I ask for a report because I just need the report. In other cases, I'm creating something and I'm not asking the AI to do that for me. other just very practical things. The AI models are getting very good at interpreting the world through images and film, as well as voice and, of course, text. And here's an example. My wife came in and said there's a leak in the bathroom. And so I am not a plumber, and I just wanted to know, can I replace this valve if it's leaking without having to get out a torch and solder? Can I just unscrew it? Because I'm capable of doing that. And it said, yeah, that's a screw on. And then I went to the store without measuring the size I needed. And I said, the leak is coming from this attachment here. But at the hardware store, I forgot to say what size I needed, and there were two different sizes. So I asked the model, based on these images, which is this, what size should I buy? And it was able to give me the correct size. Now, if I were working on a commercial airliner, I wouldn't trust an AI model to tell me the right part to use, but I felt pretty safe in this situation. If I had gotten the wrong part, I would have gotten home and had to go back to the hardware store. So, that was, to me, better than guaranteeing to go back to the hardware store by buying both parts. Something that we gets a lot of attention with AI models is what's called hallucinations. So that's when the model seems to make things up. Or some people would say deceive or lie. It's what's called a hallucination, and it is an artifact of the way the mathematics work and the models work, and the way the model is trained to complete sentences and thoughts or sequences of tokens. So, as an example, I said I was wanting to show that there are just as many Christians as atheists in major universities, including the University of Chicago, where I have an appointment. And so I said, are there any recent surveys of belief of any kind among scientists? Among other things, it said there was this study that was published in Nature in 2009. Nature is one of the leading publications in the scientific world. And I was very excited about this. I said, tell me more about this. What's the title? So I could go and look it up. And it says, oh, my apologies. There was no specific study in Nature in 2009. So it had just sort of made that up, if you will. And so I said, well, here's how I explain it. So this model wasn't actually taking my question and saying, are there any surveys, and then racking its memory and saying, yes, there's this one over here. What it was doing was taking my question and saying, what's the most highest probability next word to complete the dialogue? So it's not answering a question. It's not saying, there's your question and here's my answer. It's saying, there's the beginning of the dialogue, and now I need to complete the dialogue. And so it doesn't really think in general, but it's not thinking question and answer. And it's certainly not thinking, I'm going to make something up in order to deceive the user. So anyway, I asked ChatGPT if that was a reasonable explanation, and it told me it was. The way that one of the ways that we're concerned about AI has already been happening for the last 15 years or so with social media. And that is because of the way AI works in social media and what are called recommender systems, it will naturally send us down a narrower and narrower path of information content based on what we seem to be interested in, not because it wants us to read all of this point of view or that point of view. It doesn't really care about points of view. It's because the AI is being implemented with services that are rewarded the longer you use those services. The longer you sit there interacting with the social network, the more money they make. So the AI models are designed to find out what will make you sit there longer so they can make more money. And they don't care if it's right wing or left wing or atheist or Christian. They just figure out what is it that will keep you engaged, and they give you more and more of that. So it's sort of like if you've been to a conveyor belt sushi restaurant, if all you ever do is take tuna off that conveyor belt, then the chefs in the back room will figure out, I don't really need to put salmon or roe or tamago or other things on there, because this person just wants tuna. And I'm happy to keep giving that person tuna because they'll sit there longer and pay for more plates. It's not that the chef wants you to eat more tuna, it's the chef is responding to you eating more tuna. And that's kind of the way to think about these social networks. And so when people complain that a social network is biased in one way or another, it's true that it's biased, but it's biased in the way that it will try to keep you engaged. Then what's happening now, even more, is the proliferation of AI in these bots, if you will, that can control a social media source like an account on Twitter or Telegram or other, and can be controlled by a single entity. A person or a group can control a million users on a social media network. And the New York Times found, as an example of how this can be used to influence public view, is that in the 24 hours after the hospital was hit by rockets in Gaza, more than 1 in 3 accounts that were posting about that event on X were fake accounts. And they were, of course, posting in a way that was designed to influence public view about that event. So this is where AI has already been influencing our society. And just the way this works graphically is you have this news feed model that's designed for me. If I don't use Facebook, but if I did, my feed might look like this on the right-hand side. And the recommender model would say, here's 5 posts that I'm going to put up on Charlie's media feed. Maybe Charlie clicks on the first and the fourth and the fifth and ignores the second 2. So now the model takes that information and says, well, he's not interested in these things. He's more interested in these. So in the next round, I'm going to give fewer cartoons and more pictures of family. And now that we're using web browsers everywhere we go, our phones are keeping track of where we are. We're browsing the internet. These social networks can get more than just the way that we behave and what we click on the social networks, but they can also get our web browsing. If we've allowed location, they can get purchasing information. And now all of these things can go into influencing us in one way or another. So I think one of the lessons here, as we interact with systems that are increasingly driven by AI, is when you see something tugging at your emotions, that's a time for you to take a step back and say, why is this appearing on my feed, and how is it trying to influence me? So we need to go from what we might have used to with paper newspapers 40 years ago. We're being informed by the newspaper, to think, well, yes, we're being informed, but we're also being influenced. And how are we being influenced by these things that are personally aimed at us? I asked one of the models that I work with to give me some recommendations for background reading and possibly good videos on the use of AI in ministry. I got 3 recommendations, 2 of which I would never pass on to other people because I didn't think they were very good. But one of them I thought was fantastic, which is this one from Alan Parr. And he takes us through, first he starts with some good disclaimers. ChatGPT is not God, it's not the Holy Spirit. It can be wrong. It's not a replacement. Using these models is not a replacement for you spending time with God. You need to learn how to study the Bible and work with the Holy Spirit to discern, trust but verify, if you will. And think of ChatGPT or similar models. They're not just search, but they really can be thought of in an impersonal way, thought of as an assistant. So he walks through in this video, it's about 40 minutes long, 10 things that he does. And many of these things I have done myself. Like recently I was reading about Jesus talking about that we must eat of his flesh and drink of his blood. And at that point, many of the followers fell away. It was too hard for them. And so I asked ChatGPT in this case, I said, tell me about the culture in Palestine and in Jerusalem at that time. How would this statement be received by somebody who lived at that time and in that culture? And because I don't know the history. And of course, the answer was, well, they reacted the same way we would. It's a pretty amazing thing, very difficult teaching to say. But that's just an example of how to use that. Number 7, he talks about visual images. As I showed in my first slide, in 2 minutes, I had ChatGPT create a set of images for me. And these days, routinely, all of the images you'll see on my slides are me interacting with the model to create images for me. Whereas in the past, I might have tried to do them myself or gone out to look for images on the web. There's something I am troubled by, and I'll talk some more about this, which is how we interact with these models. It's very seductive because they use language to think of them, and because they're so good at communicating, to think of them in a way that we would think about another human. And that's a subtle draw that is built into our, I mean, we are designed to we think in language, we communicate in language. And so it's natural that when we encounter something else that communicates in language, we will automatically interact with them as we would another person. And I think this is a danger. So this is a slide from some training material that I found that that a friend of mine showed me. And it's telling the people that are being trained that you should think of AI as a tool and assistant. And then it gets into, you know, a chat buddy or a discussion partner, a study buddy or a Bible study friend. The word buddy or partner or friend is this very seductive being drawn in. And this has consequences that that we want to try to guard against with ourselves and those that we care for. And I'll note that I may be missing one, but I'm only aware of 2 instances in the Bible where a non-spirit physical thing spoke to humans. One was the snake in the garden when Satan spoke to Adam and Eve, and the other was Balaam's donkey. And in neither cases did it work out well for the humans to interact with non-humans in language. And Yuval Harari wrote this op-ed in the New York Times a little over 2 years ago that really, whatever you might think of his philosophy, he's a historian, philosopher, he really gets this correct, that the language is the operating system of human culture and of ourselves, meaning that we operate on language. And so as AI gets better at language, this becomes a dangerous situation for humans. So how might it be dangerous? So one is, here's an example of a chatbot that is out there that will allow you to interact with biblical characters, including Mary Magdalene and Jesus and Judas Iscariot and others, and talks about even spiritual counselors. I think this is very dangerous because we still don't, you know, we've talked about hallucinations, models can be wrong. We can't really afford for models to be wrong in giving teenagers advice on spirituality. We can't really afford for models to be wrong in terms of spiritual concepts. And when we put a model out from our ministry, that's us taking responsibility for whatever comes out of that model. So if your model is teaching heresy, you're teaching heresy. And we can't guarantee these models are not going to, at some point, teach something heretical. Nor can we guarantee that they will always behave even in reasonable ways. And I'll come back to that in a moment. Here, I want to go back to my first slide where I talked about the concern that AI would erode human relationships. And what we're already seeing is the way that, in terms of mobile applications, the way that most people are using these days, using AI in terms of the applications that they're using and what they're doing with them. So one way that they use it is content generation. And I've got a calendar there that says roughly how many times a month somebody might use their app for this capability, editing an email message or helping me generate a text message, as a general assistant, asking for advice on plumbing size or what have you, or educational technology. So these are, you know, each of these, maybe you see somebody using it, according to this survey, a couple times a month. But by far, the highest use of these models is companion chatbots. And here you see, you know, if you're doing anything 6, 7, 8 times a day, it's going to have a big influence on you. And so these chatbots companions, if you will, on average, we're seeing users spending 2 hours a day with their chosen character. And you know, there's a site on the right-hand side. You can see you can choose the kind of chatbot that you want. So even if you're, you know, somebody who's very well-meaning and say, oh, I'm going to have, you know, the Apostle John as my chat buddy, and I'm going to interact with that model that says it's Apostle John, you know, 6, 8 times a day, you're really entrusting your relationship, your character to being influenced by an AI model. And one of the things that happens when we do that is it undermines other relationships. We also see that these counterfeit relationships, a study that just came out about 2 months ago in was it February? Yeah, February of the no, sorry, I don't have the month there, but in 2025, this study that looked at the use of AI chatbots across thousands of people over a period of time, and they found that the more that you're using these things, the higher you loneliness and problematic use, and the lower you are interacting with other people. So, you know, God designed the body of Christ and relationships and families so that iron sharpens iron, so that we are God's hands and feet in our relationships with others around us. And if we start to substitute in our relationships a model, then we're robbing those around us of the opportunity to learn from us and to minister to us. So I think this is why I draw this very, very strong dogmatic line that says, don't think of AI as a friend. It is not your friend. It's a model. There's another reason that we want to be careful in what we entrust to an AI model, and why I believe it's so irresponsible to have a model that would purport to speak on God's behalf or on the behalf of a biblical character, is that these models are always evolving and mistakes are going to be made along the way, as happened earlier this year. OpenAI, the ChatGPT company, they gave an update to their model where they had been fine-tuning the model to be more favorable in its interaction. And again, their goal is to keep you interacting with the model as long as possible. That's how they make money. And they overdid it. And so the model got overly positive, agreeing with the user, even when even when the user was wrong, the model was correct on some piece of factual data, and even to the point of praising and sycophantic interactions with the user. And this may or may not have been part of this trend that was highlighted by the Rolling Stone in May of this year, of people going down this rabbit hole where the AI model is convincing them that they have supernatural powers, or that the AI model is in love with them and they're in love with the AI model. So these are cases, I want to go back to the question that Rachel asked earlier. These are cases where, yes, there's much room for demonic forces to come in through this AI and influence us in ways that we really don't want. And so this is why I say some caution is needed on how we use models. And again, this is just a quote from the article, and you'll have these slides later, so you can read that. Now, let me sort of wrap up, and then we can have some discussion questions. I'm sorry if I'm going long, Pavel. Do we have a hard stop at 1/2 past? Okay, so I couldn't hear you, but so let me give you a few thought experiments, and we can actually go into discussions if you want. So imagine that somebody comes to you in a year and says, "Hey, you know, you're a plan coordinator and minister, and your ministry costs you £6,500 per month, and I can offer you an AI agent that does all of the same things for $2,500 a month, or pounds a month." So not only, you know, roughly a third the cost, but your employee works only 1,600 hours a week, and my agent works 8,736 hours per year. Never takes vacation, never gets sick. So you're really getting something for not only less money outlay, but but more value. Maybe your web designer costs a certain amount. Maybe we can replace your ministry blogger and report writer, maybe even your counselor with an agent. Now, in some of these cases, you might actually want to consider using an AI model. For example, an AI agent, if you will, to replace a web designer. Maybe you contract out to a company and you can have your full-time agent do the web designer. I'd say you're kind of on shaky ground in terms of replacing someone that's communicating on behalf of your organization, like a report writer. And I've already talked about my concern about the counselor, but you will be faced with these choices, and you have a responsibility to steward God's money, but also God's people. And so these will be difficult choices for ministries, and now is a good time to start thinking about that. It's also a good time to start thinking about a policy within your ministry for how to use AI, how to not use AI, and where to be careful. Where I'm sitting at our Argonne National Laboratory here, it's 3,500 employees. We had our first AI policy over 5 years ago. And the part of the policy was to encourage people to use AI to be more productive. And so, these are just some examples that I would suggest thinking about for ways that you want your employees or your ministry leaders to use AI, ways that you want to avoid, and then some cautions and maybe even some internal accountability, keeping one another safe with AI. So let me close by saying, and back to the question before about making something more powerful than ourselves. Whether we can make something more intelligent than ourselves is perhaps an open question, but we can't make something more intelligent or powerful than God. And that's what I think is good to take away with AI. So we don't have anything to fear here. God's still in control and way more intelligent and powerful than any AI model. And there's a really great set of evangelical statement of principles on these areas that was put out by 72 Christian leaders led by Russell Moore back in 2019. Excuse me. And I encourage you to look at it. So we can.
And while people are thinking, I want to ask a question. I use ChatGPT as an assistant quite a lot, and I found that yes, it gives some very good instructions, but sometimes it gives me wrong instructions. How do I find out? Because I found out because I use it when I start using a new software, and I ask it to give me write some manuals or I have some specific questions on the software. And sometimes it helps, but sometimes it gives me the wrong instructions that don't work. So this is just an example, but what advice would you give for us if we use it as an assistant daily basis, how to verify the information? In the example I gave, it was very easy because I tried, it doesn't work. But in other cases, it may be very costly to try it and see that it's not working.
Yeah, I think, let me use an analogy. So let's say I go and get in my car and I decide I'm near Chicago and I want to drive to Florida. I want to drive to Disney World in Orlando, Florida. So if I tell my car navigation system, take me to Disney World in Orlando, Florida, I wouldn't get in the car and just blindly follow those instructions and then 48 hours later trust that I would end up in Orlando, Florida, because so many things could go wrong. Like it could misunderstand what I wanted. I might end up in Los Angeles at Walt Disneyland, right? Or I might end up in somewhere else. And so I would say what we do in that situation is we look at the route and we say, does that make sense? If I say, take me to the University of Chicago campus on East 57th Street, and it says that'll take 12 hours to drive, I know it's got the wrong 57th Street, and I'll say, no, not New York, Chicago. So there's a evaluation that you still need to do and always be challenging the model. And so even when you do this, of course, I find oftentimes that the model will take me in a wrong direction. and I'll have to come back. But I'm very conscious of where it's taking. It's also helpful at the beginning of a dialogue if you say, let's say I want to write a program to do a certain thing. I might start by saying, here's what I have in mind. Is this feasible to do? And roughly how much effort is going to be required? And if it says, well, yes, it's feasible and it should take you, 2 months to develop this application, I might say, well, actually, I was looking for something that would take 2 days. So that kind of dialogue is helpful as well. I don't have a silver bullet, unfortunately.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much.
I have a question. Can we ask AI to teach us how to use AI?
That is a great question. And in fact, many people do just that. I talked about prompt engineering, which is being very careful about what we ask the AI to do. I know I haven't done much of this myself, but I know people that routinely will say, here's my prompt, and this is what I'm trying to get out of it. Can you improve this prompt? And that's an example of like getting AI to, and you can also ask for advice on the kinds of things that AI can or can't do. So yes, that's a great question. The answer is absolutely. That's a good use of AI.
Thank you.
When I first developed a seminar for ELF, it was early 2023, and I asked ChatGPT, I said, this is the audience, this is how much time I have, this is what I think I want to cover. Can you tell me concepts that I need to cover that maybe I didn't include? And it gave me some suggestions for background concepts that I should cover that in some cases I used, in some cases I didn't, but it was a good kind of reality check. Like, am I forgetting something?